Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Ches, Daf 8 of Masechta Beitzah. Friends, what can I tell you about Daf 8? Masechta Beitzah is a complicated Masechta. What do you want me to tell you? Anyways, so we're going to talk about Kisoy Adam, covering up the blood of undomesticated animals and birds that were slaughtered. So we're going to talk about that on Yom Tov. Then we're going to get into this whole discussion about like this koi animal. This koi is like this animal that we're not sure if it's an animal or like a domesticated animal or an undomesticated animal, and how does that fit into like Yom Tov and Kisoy Adam and all that kind of stuff. Friends, let's begin on Daf Zayin Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom of Modim Shem Shochat Sheach B'Bedeka V'Yichase, that Beitzah admits that if you slaughter, right, meaning that right there it said that so Beitzah said that that you should only slaughter an animal on Yom Tov if you already had the dirt for the Kisoy Adam already ready. But they admit that if you did slaughter the animal, so then Shiach B'Bedeka V'Yichase, that you can dig up a shtickle dirt and do Kisoy Adam if you already slaughtered the animal. Omer Reb Zrika, Omer Reb Yehuda. Now says Reb Zrika in the name of Reb Yehuda, V'usheyesh lo deker na'utz mi be'od yom. Now says Reb Zrika in the name of Reb Yehuda, however, in order for this to be possible, both according to Beis Shammai and according to Beis Hillel, that if you're going to be digging up this dirt to be able to do Kisoy Adam, the spade will have had to already be shtupped into the ground from before Yom Tov, because otherwise you have to be concerned about choresh, about plowing, like the ground. So you need at least the spade to have been shtupped into the ground before Yom Tov, and in that way at least you're not shtupping the spade into the ground, which would be like choresh. But then frek the Gemara v'aka avid k'tisha. But still, if you just pull up some dirt with a spade from the ground, it's going to be hard, and you're going to have to break it up, and that would be kotesh, of like breaking things up, and you're not going to be allowed to do that. So says Rav Chia bar Ashi in the name of Rav that we're talking here about soft dirt, so dirt that doesn't need to be broken up. But you can be making a hole in the ground, and that's going to be a type of binyan. That Reb Abba says if a fellow digs a hole on Shabbos, but he doesn't need the hole, he only needs the dirt, well then it's just going to be mekalkel, like destroying. You're just digging a hole in the ground. So that's mekalkel, and called mekalkel in Pturin, as we learned in Masechta Shabbos, that if you do mekalkel, if you do a destructive act on Shabbos, so you are potter for that. And therefore, in this case, if you need to kind of do Kisoy Adam, and you're able to remove some dirt from the ground that's already soft, and you can cover the blood, so givaldik. Shefer kira muchanu. Now, the Mishnah had said something very interesting and somewhat cryptic at the end of the Mishnah, that the ash from a stove is already considered prepared. It's not muktzah. Now, frek the Gemara, who had said anything about ashes from stoves? Why all of a sudden are we invoking ashes from stoves being considered non-muktzah? That no, it's not she'efer kira muchanhu. It's not that, which would sound as if it's like explaining that since the ash of a stove is not muktzah. No, it's not since, which would sound like it's explaining. But what's it explaining? It seems random. No, rather it's saying vi she'efer kira muchanu, and that also in terms of when it comes to Kisoy Adam, the ash from a stove would be considered, if you have a stove and it has ash in it, you would be able to use that for Kisoy Adam if you don't have dirt ready. Amar Yehuda Amar Rav, and says reviewed in the name of Rav, Lo Shanu Ella Shehusak Me'erev Yom Tov. Now, when we're talking about this ash that's coming from this stove, we're talking about that the stove was already burnt out and the wood was burnt from before Yom Tov. So it was already ash before Yom Tov. And then since it was ash already before Yom Tov, so you didn't have it, you could do anything with this ash. You have ash available to you. You can use it for Kisoy Adam if you want. Aval Husuk B'Yom Tov, also. But if we're talking about ash that didn't exist before Yom Tov, it only came into being on Yom Tiv because you burnt up the wood on Yom Tiv and made the ash on Yom Tiv, well then clearly you didn't have intention before Yom Tiv to be using this ash for Kisui Adam on Yom Tiv because it didn't exist before Yom Tiv. However, if there's still some wood that's burning, and you can roast an egg on that wood, these embers that are still burning, well, you can use that for Kisui Adam, because if there are embers, you'd be allowed to move them around in order to, cook an egg, let's say, and, the wood was set aside to be burnt, and as long as there are still embers from the wood, you can move that around in order to, cook and stuff. So since you can move it around to do that stuff, so you can also use it for Kisui Adam. Tani Rami Hochi, we also learn in a Beitzah like this. When they said that the ashes from a stove are considered prepared and that they're not muksa, that's only if the stove was used and burnt out before Yom Tiv, and that the wood was burnt up before Yom Tiv and the ash existed before Yom Tiv. But if the stove was burnt on Yom Tiv and the ash was created on Yom Tiv, also, you're not allowed to use it for Kisui Adam because it obviously didn't exist before Yom Tiv and you couldn't have had intention before Yom Tiv that you're going to be using it for Kisui Adam. But if there are still embers in the ash that you would be able to use to cook an egg, so then, since you can move those around in the context of cooking, they're not muksa in that context, and you can also use them to do Kisui Adam. If a fellow brought in some dirt into his garden or into some other structure that he has, and it's there in his garden all piled up, he's got a big pile of dirt that he brought in. So he basically brought in, and you could essentially use it for whatever he wants. He's got a big pile of dirt and you can go to town with it, have fun. You can even do Kisui Adam with it. Right, so ichnis offer the ginos you'd be allowed to use that dirt for Kisui Adam. Okay, very nice. Rav Yehuda says, machnis adam lo kupaso offer, a fellow could bring into his house a basket full of dirt, and he can do whatever he wants with it, including Kisui Adam. Darish Marzucha Mishmei the Marzucha Rabba Vushi Yichidol Karen Zavis says Marzucha in the name of says Marzucha in the name of Marzucha Rabba that, however, in order to be able to do whatever you want with this dirt, you would have had to have specify a corner of the house, put it in a specific place, right? Because otherwise the concern is maybe it's just bottled to the dirt of the ground, right? So in order to show that you're setting it aside specifically for your own personal use and you can use it for whatever you want, you would have to take this basket full of dirt and kind of put it over in the corner, dump it out in the corner, then you can use it for whatever you want. Okay, now we get into this, sort of in this context of Rav Yehuda being able to take this pile of dirt and put it in the corner and be able to use it for whatever you want, including Kisui Adam. So we then get into this discussion regarding this koi. Now a koi is a type of animal that's a suffix. We're not sure, is it a chaya, an undomesticated animal, in which case you have to do Kisui Adam. Or is it a behemoth? Is it considered like a domesticated animal? In which case, you don't need to do Kisui Adam. Okay, so let's see. How does this? So let's see how this ties in to our Gemara. So Meisvei, we have a kasha. Koi. When it comes to this koi animal, ein shochten also b'Yom Tov. You're not allowed to slaughter it on Yom Tov. V'im shochto ein mechasen es damo. And if you do slaughter it, so then don't do Kisui Adam, because we're not sure if it's a behemoth or a chay. We're not sure if you need to do Kisui Adam or not. So first we say, look, don't slaughter it. Don't, just don't go there, because we don't know if you're going to have to do Kisui Adam, and in case it's a chay and you do have to do Kisui Adam, you're not going to be able to, so just don't go there. And if you did slaughter it, then you cannot do Kisui Adam, because just in case it's a behemoth, you wouldn't have to be doing Kisui Adam. So V'Isa, now if Rav Yehuda is right, that, you can just take some dirt that you had in the corner and use that for Kisui Adam, then who cares? Why do we say, don't slaughter this koi animal? And if you did, don't do Kisui Adam. If Rav Yehuda is right, that you could just have a basket full of dirt in your corner and you can use that for Kisui Adam, What's wrong with slaughtering a koi? Just take some of this dirt that's in the corner and cover the blood with it. It's not muktzah or anything. It says, alright, you could do kol tzorko with it. Do whatever the heck you want, including kisui adam. So v'isa, if you could do whatever you want with this dirt in the corner, including putting it on the blood of a suffix animal, l'chase, so just cover it up. You could do Rav Yehuda. U'l'taimech, but fact the Gemara, 1 second. That's not really a great kasha because l'chase be'efer kira, or bedeker knows. But you can ask the same question. It's not limited to Rav Yehuda's opinion regarding the dirt that you put in the corner. Why don't you also ask, well, why don't you use the efer kira? Why don't you cover the blood of this koi with ash that you have from your oven, which we said is not considered muktzah, is considered muchan? Or why don't you, if you have a spade that's stuffed into the ground, why don't you just use that dirt? It must be talking about where you don't have a spade stuffed into the ground, or it must be talking about where you don't have ash from an oven, and therefore also it's talking about where you don't have dirt in the corner. And that's why we're saying, since you don't have any of these options available to you, therefore don't be slaughtering this suffix be'ema, suffix chaya, this koi. If that's the case, ma'ir yasafik, afilu v'adenamilo. But if that's the case, then why are we making such a big deal out of a koi? If this is the case, you shouldn't even be slaughtering, animals that you know for sure are you have to do kisui adam, right? So for example, a deer or a chicken, you have to do kisui adam, right? So why are we saying specifically this koi, this very fancy animal, you don't have any options to be able to do kisui adam, you don't have any ashes, you don't have anything, so now you can't do kisui adam. Okay, what's so special about this koi? I mean, basically in any case where you'd have to do kisui adam, if you don't have it available to you, if you don't have dirt available to you, you can't do it. A chicken too, slaughter a chicken. You can't cover the blood, you don't have dirt available. So what's so special about the koi in this respect? So lo mibaya kamer. So my answer is, well, we're saying not only this, but even that. Lo mibaya vadai d'lo lishchot. Okay, so obviously when it comes to, let's say, a chicken, don't slaughter a chicken on Yom Tov if you don't have dirt to do kisui adam, because you have to do kisui adam and you don't have dirt for it. So obviously don't be slaughtering a chicken. However, aval sofek ebu mishum simchas Yom Tov lishchot v'lo l'chaseh. I might think that, however, when it comes to a koi, which, so we don't have any dirt available to do kisui adam, but I might think because of simchas Yom Tov, in order to be able to enjoy the Yom Tov with basar, with meat, so maybe I should be able to slaughter this koi, because after all, it's only a suffix. Maybe it's taka a behema, in which case I don't have to do kisui adam. So maybe we could take the chance. Maybe I might think that when it comes to a koi, even if I don't have dirt to be able to do kisui adam, maybe still I could slaughter it, because to be mekayim simchas Yom Tov, to enjoy v'samachta b'chagecha, I should be able to have a good leibedik time with meat of a koi. And okay, I don't have any dirt to do kisui adam, but who knows? Maybe it's a behema anyways, and it's not necessary. So kamash malan, therefore that's why we're saying specifically a koi. That even a koi, certainly let's say a chicken, don't slaughter it because you're going to have to do kisui adam and you're not going to be able to. But maybe I would think that a koi, I would be able to slaughter it because maybe, in terms of the suffix, we'll waive the suffix and we'll be lenient and say, well, let's just treat it like a behema that doesn't need kisui adam in order for us to be able to enjoy simchas Yom Tov kamash malan. That's why the Beitzah had to teach us that no, if you don't have dirt ready, do not slaughter the koi on Yom Tov. But 1 second. So if what we're saying is true, that we're talking about a situation where we do not have any dirt options available. We don't have ash from an oven. We don't have, what were some other options that we had? Ash from an oven, a spade stuffed in the ground. We don't have any dirt in the corner. We got nothing. We got no options for kisui adam. But if that's the case, if we continue reading that Beitzah, what does it say? And if you do kisui, and if you do slaughter it, a koi, you don't do kisui adam. I mean, isn't that obvious that you wouldn't do? If you did slaughter, right? You don't have any dirt options available to you, and we're saying don't slaughter a koi even for simchas Yom Tov. Don't slaughter a koi, and if you did slaughter it, don't do kisui adam. Isn't that obvious? Even in a situation of, let's say, a chicken that certainly needs to do kisui adam, but you don't have any dirt available, you're not going to do kisui adam, and that's where you have a chiyuv, you have to do kisui adam. A koi where you're not sure, maybe it actually might be a behemoth and it doesn't have a chiyuv kisui adam. Obviously, you're not going to, be mechal yomtiv in order to do kisui adam. So why would I need, if we're talking about a situation where there's no dirt available for kisui adam, why then would the Beitzah have to say that if you did slaughter a koi, you don't do kisui adam? That's a no-brainer. So michlal, rather, b'de'isle askinan. So rather, okay, what we're saying right now, that there's no dirt available is not correct. It must be where there is dirt available, and that's why it has to say that if you do slaughter it, don't do kisui adam on the koi. But then if there is dirt available, so then back to our original question, well then if there's dirt available, then why don't you do kisui adam on the koi, right? Why did we say don't slaughter the koi? Why not? There's dirt available. Why can't you do kisui adam? Just do kisui adam in the koi, regular. You have the dirt available. Elo, my Rave, rather says Rave, Efer kira muchan levadai vein muchan lesafik. Rather, wait one second, where am I? Yeah, okay, fine. So Efer kira muchan levadai vein muchan lesafik. Okay, Rave wants to say, it says that's what I was checking out. It says in the Gemara Rabbah, but there's different gears that says Rava. What do you guys want me to tell you? Rava or Rabbah? Let's go with Rava, why not, So, it says Rave that the ashes from a oven are considered muchan, i.e. they're not muksa, they're usable, are considered muchan for vadais. For let's say a chicken that you have to do kisui adam. So you can use the ash from the stove for the chicken, for a vadai, for a certain kisui adam that you definitely have to do. Ve'e muchan l'safik, but it is muktzah, i.e. it's not muchan, it's not usable for a safik. This ash from a stove is not going to be usable for the koi, which is a safik. Now the Gemara wants to know why not. The safik my time alo. Guma. What's the problem with the koi? Are you concerned that, well, when you chop some of the ash, or let's say dirt from the ground, you're going to make a hole? Vadanami kavid guma. You're going to make a hole also if you're chopping for a chicken. Say elikadrab abba. So must be the answer is like we saw. Was it earlier on today's daf, right? Rabbi Abba's opinion, which is that if you dig a hole on Shabbos and you just need the dirt, you're not interested in making the hole, so then it's mekakal. It's just destroying, and mekakal, right? Call mekakal b'turin. On Shabbos you're potter from mekakal. But if that's the case, hachanami kedu Abba. So then let's say the same thing by a suffix, by a koi. Let's say it's like Rabbi Abba, that it's mekakal, and it should be allowed then by a koi. Say elo suffix my taimo. Dilma Ovid Ketisha. Okay, well, by the koi, the problem is that you might come to a situation where you're going to do Ketisha. If you have dirt that is clumped together, you might have to break it apart, and that would be a problem of Ketisha. But Ketisha. But then we should say the same thing by a chicken too. That, where you definitely have to do Kisui Adam, but still, what about Ketisha? What about breaking up the dirt? So Vada Kika Ovid Ketisha, Osi Ese Vidachi Es Lo Saise. Oh. But when it comes to a Vadai, when it comes to let's say a chicken, where you definitely have to do kisui adam, so even if there's going to be ketisha involved, even if there's going to be a situation where you can be breaking up the ground in order to do the kisui adam, nonetheless, there's a concept of aseh doche lo ta'aseh, that in mitzvahs aseh of v'chiseu be'ofar, v'chiseu or v'chisau? What do you guys think? V'chisau be'ofar. So it says in the pasuk, a mitzvah saseh, that you have to do kisui adam. You have to cover the blood of a chaya or an oaf. You have to do kisui adam. So let's say that the positive commandment of v'chisau be'ofar should override the negative commandment of lo saise kol malacha. Aseh dochi lo taise. So therefore, when it comes to the vadai, when it comes to like a chicken, for example, So we could say that even if it comes to Katisha, that's not going to be a problem, because the asay of V'chisal ba'afar is going to override the lo taseh of lo taseh kol malacha of Yom Tiv, and that's why you could, even if it comes to Katisha, it would be okay in the context of a vadai, but Masha Ein by a suffix. Fine. But then the Gemara says, wait a second. But I don't know that Kisoy Adam is a situation of asay doche lo taseh. Because Ema Daminun Osi Asay V'Dachi Lo Taisei Kigomila B'Tzaras Inami Sodom B'Tzitzis. I'll say that what's an example of Asay Doche Lo Tasei? What's an example of a positive commandment overriding a negative commandment? An example is doing bris milah if there's tzaras on the orla, or if you're putting linen tzitzis on a wool garment, or no, probably wool tzitzis on a linen garment, which is shatnez, but nonetheless we say it's okay. At the time that you're doing the lav, right? Because when it comes to milah by tzaras, you're not allowed to remove tzaras from your body. If you have tzaras anywhere on your body, you're not allowed to cut it off. You're not allowed to remove it. And yet we're saying if there's tzaras on the orla, in order to do bris milah, which you're going to be cutting off the tzaras, but at the same time, at that very moment, you're also doing the mitzvah of bris milah, of removing the orla. Or when it comes to tzitzis, right? So you're not allowed to wear shatnez, right? So there's, right, lo silba shatnez. But it also says, gdilim taisilach, put strings on your four-cornered garments. So at the very time that you are, being mekayim the mitzvah of tzitzis, that is when you're like violating the lo taseh of lo silba shatnez. So the aseh is docha the lo taseh. But over here, when it comes to Kisei Adam, at the time that you're doing the lav, i.e. when you're breaking up the ground and you're violating the lo ta'aseh kol malacha, you're not doing the Kisei Adam right now. When you then take the dirt and cover the blood, then you're doing Kisei Adam. But it's not, at the toch kedei, at the same time. Halo kasha, the ba'ad the kotish kom machase. So we say, that's not really such a question, because you could say that it's talking about that at the same time, he does like this he does this very fancy move where he breaks up the dirt at the same time that he's covering the blood. It's a very fancy, very complex Kisui Adam. It's really for the advanced Kisui Adamniks. But he was an advanced Kisui. He had a lot of experience with Kisui Adam, and he was able to mamish at the same time that he does the Ketisha, he was able to do the Kisui Adam. And therefore, it should be an example of Aseh Doche Lo Taseh, but then says the Gemara, but Sov Yom Tif Aseh V'Lo Taisehu, V'en Aseh Doche Es Lo Saise V'Aseh. The Gemara says, but forget about it. Forget about it. If you want to argue that the reason why the dirt is considered set aside for a vadai, but not set aside for a suffix, for a koi. If you want to say that it's because it's a idea of asay dochi lo ta'aseh, that the asay of the chisau ba'afar is going to be dochi the lo ta'aseh of lo saisik o malacha, forget about it. Because Yom Tif is not just a lo ta'aseh, it's also an asay. It says, what does the pasuk say? It says, Bayom Arishon Shabboson. Right, Yom Tif. I hope I didn't say Shabbos. Right, Yom Tif is not just a lo taseh, but also as an aseh. It says B'yom Harishon Shabboson, that on the first day is a Shabbos. It's saying Shabboson, you should rest, but at the same time, rest implies not to be doing any other malacha. But it's an aseh, right? Saying to rest. It's not a negative commandment; it's a positive commandment. So ultimately, Yom Tiv is not just a lo taseh; it's a lo taseh plus an aseh, and therefore the aseh of V'chisau ba'afar of Kisui Adam will not be doche the aseh and the lo taseh inherent in Yom Tiv. And therefore, we're back to our question of why would we say that this dirt would be usable for like a chicken, but not usable for a koi? We're having a hard time answering this. Our latest suggestion was that, well, even if you end up breaking up the clod of dirt for the chicken, that would be okay because it's aseh doche lo taseh. But it's not true. This is a situation of aseh being doche lo taseh v'aseh, and that doesn't work. ein aseh doche lo ta'aseh v'aseh. Elo amar Rave, so rather Rave says, offer kira daito levadai vein daito lesofik. Ha ha. So and for Rave, so Rave says that actually, here's the thing. When you have this ashes from the stove, so his intention, when he has these ashes and he's thinking about all the possibilities of things that he can do with these ashes, only sort of the vadai things come into his head, right? So for example, using it for kisei adam, for a chicken, that's what he's thinking about. But not for a koi, not for a suffix. He's not thinking, oh, I can use these ashes to cover the blood of a koi. He's not thinking that. And therefore, the ashes work for a vadai, right? Meaning, so he has intention, he has in mind that he could use these ashes for a vadai, for a chicken, but not for a suffix, for a koi. And therefore, they're only considered set aside. They're only usable for a, something that's a vadai, like a chicken or a deer or something like that, not for a koi. Fine. And Rava is consistent with his reasoning. The Rava says, if a fellow, prepares before Yom Tif dirt because he's got a toddler darting and he's concerned that the toddler might, go to the bathroom at a random time and he might end up defecating on the floor of the house, and that wouldn't be very nice. And therefore he sets aside dirt from before Yom Tif, so that in the event that this happens, now it might not happen, but just in case it does happen, he'll have dirt prepared for the occasion. Now, if he has a bird that he had set aside to be eating on Yom Tif, so he knows that he's going to have to be doing kisei adam, that's for sure. So he's allowed to use this dirt that he brought in for a suffix, just in case he needs it for his baby. He can use that for a vada. He can use it for a kisei adam if he needs to. Well, when he needs to, because he has a bird that he's going to be slaughtering. Dam tzipor, but if he brought in the dirt for a bird, in order to do kisei adam for a bird, which is a vada, he knows that he's got a bird that he's going to be eating on Yom Tif, so he brought in some dirt. Also, the chazis botzoa, he would not be allowed to use it to cover the excrement of his baby, because that is a suffix situation. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. And therefore he didn't necessarily have intention when he brought in the dirt for the kisei adam that he knows he's going to have to do. He didn't necessarily have intention for the excrement. So we see that Rava's opinion is that intention for a vada does not cover intention for a suffix. And therefore, when he has this ash for the stove, his intention is for a vada, for example, a chicken or a deer, right, a chaya or an oaf. His intention is not for a koi, which is a suffix. Narblai Amre, whereas Narblai say afilu hichnis offer l'chases bo dam tzipor, that even if he brought in the dirt in order to do kisei adam for a bird, mutar l'chases botzoa, you would also be able to use it to cover up the excrement, because this excrement isn't such a random event. I guess babies go to the bathroom and you're not always in control of that, I guess, and therefore you can kind of assume that it's going to happen, and therefore even though it might not happen, but it likely will happen as well. So therefore, when you bring in this dirt for the kisei adam, it will also work for the tzoa as well. Amri b'may Rava, they say in Eretz Yisrael, pligi bar Reb Yossi bar Chama v'Reb Zera, v'amri lo Rabbi Reb Yossi bar Chama v'Reb Zera. Okay, so in Eretz Yisrael there's a machlokus between either Reb Yossi bar Chama and Reb Zera, or maybe it was Rabbi Reb Yossi bar Chama and Reb Zera. Okay, what do you want me to tell you? Charomer koi hareu kitzoa. So one of them says that koi is like tzoa, meaning, so one opinion is that if you brought in this dirt in order to cover the excrement of the baby, so it's a suffix, so then you can also use it for the koi, because the koi is also a suffix. So if you already brought it in for a suffix, you can use it for the other suffix for the koi. V'charomer koi eno kitzoa, whereas the others say that koi is not like a tzoa, that if you bring in the dirt for the tzoa, for the excrement of the baby, so that's like, more likely than not that you're going to have to use it. Whereas the koi, we don't know if it's a complete suffix, if it's a chaya or a behema, and therefore even if you brought in dirt to cover the excrement of the baby, you cannot use it to cover the blood of the koi. Tistaim de Ravu de Amar koi areu kitzoa. Let's say that Rava is the one who says that if you bring in the dirt for the tzoa, which is a suffix, you would be able to use it for the koi. To Amar Rava, that Rava says that a fellow who brings in dirt in order to cover up excrement, which is a suffix, he would be allowed to cover up the blood of a bird which he knows he's going to be slaughtering. So it can work for a vadai. Dam tzipor, but if he brought in the dirt for a bird, which is a vadai, also l'chasis botzoa, he wouldn't be able to cover the excrement of the baby. So we see that Rava holds that tzoa is sort of the suffix, and because tzoa is this suffix, so it would be usable also, if you bring in the dirt for this tzoa, for this excrement of the baby, which is a suffix, you can also use it for the koi, which is also a suffix to time. So we see that must be Rava's opinion. Sounds like fun. Rami Brei de Rav Yeva Amar, says Rami Brei de Rav Yeva koi hainu time de chasina. This is very interesting. It says Rami Brei de Rav Yeva that actually this is the reason why we don't do kisui adam on the koi. You ready for this? It's a very interesting answer. It's because chalev, which has come up from time to time, chalev are these certain fats in an animal that you're not allowed to eat. If you eat them, you chayiv kares. Now, a chaya, this doesn't apply to. There's no issue of eating any chalev when it comes to a chaya. So now it says, Rami Breder of Yeva, listen to this, that if the reason why you don't do kisui adam on a koi is because, well, if you do kisui adam, well, any observers, people who notice you doing kisui adam on a koi, will say, oh, why are we doing kisui adam? Obviously a koi must be a chaya. And if it's a chaya, well then there's no issue of chalev. And then they'll end up eating the chalev of a koi, and we don't want you to eat the chalev of a koi because maybe it's a behemoth. Very interesting, right? But then, in fact, the Gemara, but one second. If we're saying that it's an issue of chalev, well then why is it limited to Yom Tov? During the week as well, you shouldn't do kisui adam for a koi, because people might see and then think that it is a chaya, but that's not true. During the week, we do kisui adam for a koi, because just in case it's a behemoth. So the Gemara gives kind of like a hack. And of course, as we know here at Babylon Talmud, hacks lead to bugs. So the hack solution that the Gemara gives is that, well, anybody who sees that he's covering the blood of the koi will just think, no, he's just cleaning up his chutzner, he's just cleaning up his courtyard, he's not actually doing kisui adam on the koi, which would then to which they would then draw the conclusion that it must be a chaya. No, they're not going to make that conclusion. They're just going to say, oh, he's cleaning up his courtyard. But shachad ba'ashba might equal meimar. But then the Gemara says, yeah, but that hack only goes so far, because what if he's slaughtering the koi in a garbage heap? In the garbage heap, he's not going to be cleaning up his chutzner. So therefore, if somebody sees you do kisui adam on a koi in a garbage heap, well then they might conclude that it's a chaya. And then they might end up eating the chalev. Bali malach ma'ikal meimar. Or what if he comes to ask a shaila? What if he comes to us and he says, hey, I have this koi, do I do kisui adam or not? What do we tell him? If you're going to say that we tell him, yes, you do kisui adam, well then, won't he end up saying, well, it must be a chaya? So, Ela b'chol inami misapka amile rabbanon zil tarich b'chasi. B'yom tiv imisapka mi amile rabbanon zil tarich b'chasi. So the Gemara answers, there's actually a difference between the weekday and Yom Tiv. We're not concerned that during the week, if a fellow sees you doing kisui adam on a koi, then he'll draw the conclusion that it's a chaya. On Yom Tiv, yes. During the week, not. How come? What's the difference? Well, during the week, if a person sees you doing kisui adam on a koi, he's not going to say it must be a chaya. What's he going to say? He's going to say, look, I don't know if this is a chaya or behema, but okay, so out of suffix, we do kisui adam just in case it's a behema, just in case it's a chaya. But he's not going to say that it's certainly a chaya. But on Yom Tiv, if we say do kisei adam on a koi, even on Yom Tiv, well, if it was a suffix, whether it was a behema or a chaya, well then on Yom Tiv we wouldn't be doing kisei adam out of suffix. So if we do kisei adam on Yom Tiv, so then people might draw the conclusion that it's a chaya and then end up eating the chelib. So that is why this is only a concern on Yom Tiv, but during the week, people are just going to assume, oh, it's a suffix, so we do it just in case. But on Yom Tiv, if we're doing kisei adam, people are going to say, wow, it must really be a chaya if we're doing kisei adam even on Yom Tiv. Tani Reb Zera, says Reb Zera, lo koi bilvad amu. Now, a koi is not the only situation of something that we don't do kisei adam on Yom Tiv. Ela afilu shochat behema chaya v'of. V'nisarvu daman zeh bo zeh. What if you slaughtered a behema chaya v'of? You slaughtered a behema, a chaya, and an off. Now you have to do kisei adam for the chaya and the off. You don't do kisei adam for the behema. And all their blood got mixed together. So now, if you put blood, dirt on it, some of the effort that you're going to be exerting to do kisei adam is going to be for no reason, for a behema. Also, you're not allowed to do kisei adam on Yom Tiv because some of your effort is going to be for a behema, and behema you don't do kisei adam. Omer Reb Yossi bar Yasiniya, lo shanu ela she'en yachol lechasoso b'dikira achas. Says Reb Yossi bar Yasiniya that when we say that you don't do kisei adam for this blood that got all mixed together, that is in a situation where you'd be unable to do all of the kisei adam with just one sort of spadeful. But look, if you can just do it in one kind of like movement of the spade, in which case you're really not exerting any extra effort because it would be that same one movement of the spade, whether it was just a chaya or just an oaf or both. If you're doing that one movement for all three, you're really not exerting any extra effort, so then that would be okay. Pshita, to which the Gemara says, obviously, you're not exerting any extra effort, certainly it'll be okay. To which the Gemara answers, well, maybe I would have thought to say that you shouldn't even be able to do it in one movement of the spade, because just in case then you might conclude that, well, maybe you might end up then doing two movements of the spade, which would not be okay, because then you're exerting extra effort for the behema. So that is what Rabbi Yossi bar Yasiniya is teaching us, that, look, lemaise, if you could do it in one exertion of the spade, so then you're gold. Omer Rabba, says Rabba, shochat tzipor me'erev Yom Tiv, in mechasan also be Yom Tiv. Says Rabba, if you slaughter a bird on erev Yom Tiv, so you should do the kisei adam before Yom Tiv starts. You slaughter the bird before Yom Tiv, do the kisei adam on Yom Tiv. I'm sorry, if you slaughter the bird before Yom Tiv started, so do the kisei adam before Yom Tiv. Don't do it on Yom Tiv. And Rashi points out that, and don't worry about, well, then you might be missing out on Simchas Yom Tiv. No, because you can even eat a bird, right? It says Rashi at the end of the page, that just because you didn't do kisei adam, that doesn't make the bird asur to eat. So therefore we're saying, look, if you didn't do kisei adam before Yom Tiv, don't do it on Yom Tiv. You should have done it before Yom Tiv. Gilgal isa me'erev Yom Tiv, mafish mimena chalas Yom Tiv. Now, if you prepared a dough before Yom Tiv, you would be allowed to separate challah on Yom Tiv. Right? And as Rashi says, 1 second, shouldn't that be an issue of, right, separating, right, truma? Because, right, was it chala truma tarimu? Reishis ari sosechem chala tarimu truma. So chala is a type of truma. So shouldn't we say that just like truma samaisis, we don't separate on Yom Tiv, we also shouldn't separate chala? So we say chala is a little bit different because they didn't make this gezer, because the reason why we don't separate Trumas and Maisus and Yom Tov is because it's like misakin. It's like you're like fixing the, like tevel, and now you're like fixing it to be able to be eaten. But over here it's a little different, because since you're allowed to prepare a dough anyways on Yom Tov in order to eat it fresh, so therefore they didn't make that gezerah of truma when it comes to challah. So therefore, if you prepared a dough before Yom Tov, you'd be allowed to separate the challah even on Yom Tov. Avud Shmuel Amar, says Avud Shmuel, afilu gilgal isam erev Yom Tov, ein mafish b'mena chalas of Yom Tov, that you would not be allowed to separate challah on Yom Tov. If you prepared the dough before Yom Tov, you would not be allowed to separate the challah on Yom Tov. If you prepare a dough on Yom Tov, sure, you could separate the challah, but not if you prepared it before Yom Tov. Lema pliga de Shmuel ad Avua. Let's say that Shmuel argues with his father, Avua de Shmuel. Because Shmuel says, that Shmuel says that when it comes to challah in chutzlaritz, now in chutzlaritz challah is only midrabanan. In chutzlaritz challah is only midrabanan. So it says Shmuel that in chutzlaritz, when it comes to challah, you'd be allowed to like eat all around it and then just leave it over at the end. And therefore leave over like at the end the challah, and that'll be your challah. You don't have to separate the challah though. And therefore separating the challah doesn't really serve any purpose. And if it doesn't serve any purpose, there isn't technically anything wrong with separating it on Yom Tov. So therefore, according to Shmuel, it sounds like you'd be allowed to separate it on Yom Tov, but his father seems to be saying that you're not allowed to separate the challah on Yom Tov. So but 1 second. Rava says, even Shmuel, who says that you can sort of eat around it and leave the challah at the end, but but he would admit that if you did separate challah, it would be considered challah. And therefore, Shmuel doesn't necessarily argue with his father, because he could agree that, don't separate challah on Yom Tov. Maybe you can eat around it, but don't separate challah on Yom Tov. Okay, friends, that was Daf Ches of Masechta Beitzah. There was like a lot of stuff on Daf Ches. First, we started talking about that when we say that you're allowed to do Kisui Adam on Yom Tov, even if you don't have, right? So Beis Hillel said that if you slaughtered an animal on Yom Tov, so b'diavad you'd be allowed to do Kisui Adam. So we say that would only be though if the spade was already stupped in the ground, so you don't have to do the melacha of chofer, and also the dirt would have to be soft. There would have to be certain conditions under which you would be allowed to do Kisui Adam, because you wouldn't be allowed to be Mechal Shabbos or Yom Tov in order to do that. Okay, then we discussed different things that you're allowed to use for Kisui Adam. So you can even use like ash from an oven, but the ash would have had to been already prepared for before Yom Tov. Or if it's ash on Yom Tov, so there would have to be at least some embers left, so that it wouldn't be muktzah. And then we saw that Rav Yehuda said that you'd even be allowed to take like take like a basket full of dirt and dump it into your corner, and then you can use it for whatever you want. And based on that, we then got into this whole discussion of a koi, right? Because initially we asked, because we have a brayso that says that you shouldn't slaughter a koi. A koi is an animal that may be a behemoth or maybe a chaya. And we say that you shouldn't slaughter on Yom Tov, and if you did, you don't do Kisui Adam. And the question is, if Rav Yehuda is right that you can take dirt from a basket and put it in the corner, so then you can do whatever you want with it. So what's wrong with slaughtering a koi? Just use the dirt in the corner for Kisui Adam. So the first way that we answered it is to say, well, it's talking about a situation where he doesn't have dirt in the corner, because just like he also doesn't have any ash from the oven or any spade stooped into the ground. That's why he's not able to do it. So that was the first way to explain why you would be unable to do Kisui Adam for this koi animal on Yom Tov. However, we asked the kasha on that then the sefer wouldn't make sense, so we end up offering a different answer. Rava says, well, because the dirt that you set aside for Kisui Adam, you're only setting aside for vadai, so, for example, like a chicken or a deer or something, but not for suffix like a koi. But then we asked all sorts of questions. I don't understand what should be the difference between a suffix or a vadai. The only concerns that, if we're concerned about like making a hole in the ground, it's the same by the suffix and the vadai, it's the same hole, right? And then we got into some saying maybe asay dochelot asay. We say, yeah, but this isn't a case of asay dochelot asay. It's a situation of asay dochelot asay v'asay, but it doesn't actually work. So then Rava gave a different answer, which is that, well, what you actually have in mind, what you have intention for this dirt is you only have in mind chickens, things that you're actually going to need to do Kisui Adam for. You don't have in mind things like a koi that is actually a suffix. Then we saw an interesting opinion of Rav Mari Breder of Yeva, which is that actually the concern by a koi is that if people see you doing Kisui Adam for a koi on Yom Tov, then they might say, wow, you're doing Kisui Adam for a koi on Yom Tov, it must be a chaya. And if it's a chaya, you might end up eating the chelev, which is forbidden fats. So that is why actually we don't do Kisui Adam for a koi. Then we saw the opinion of Reb Zera, which is that it's not only a koi that we refrain from doing Kisui Adam, But also, if you have the blood of a behema, a chaya, and an oaf that all got mixed together, you would not be allowed to do kisui adam, since some of the kisui adam, you're going to be exerting effort for a behema. And a behema, you're not supposed to do kisui adam for you. There's no mitzvah of kisui adam. So therefore, don't do it. And then says, Rav Yosef bar Asinia, what was his name? Yasinia, says, Rav Yosef bar Yasinia says that, but if you can do it all in kind of one fell swoop, so then it would be okay, because you're not exerting any extra effort. And then we said that it says Rabbah that if you slaughter a bird before Yom Tov, you have to do kisui adam before Yom Tov. You can't do kisui adam for a bird that you slaughtered before Yom Tov on Yom Tov. And we said, however, when it comes to separating challah, you would be allowed to separate challah from a dough that you prepared before Yom Tov. You could separate challah on Yom Tov, since you could separate since you can you could make a dough anyways on Yom Tov. Avodah Shmuel, however, disagrees and says that no, even a dough that was prepared before Yom Tov, you would not be allowed to separate challah on Yom Tov. Only for a dough that you prepared on Yom Tov would you be allowed to separate challah on Yom Tov. Friends, that was Daf Ches of Masechta Beitzah. I hope you enjoyed it. Cheers.